My name is Tiffany Stepney, and this is my story of how I used to love a crackhead. So, just to give you a little background so that you can understand where my head was at the time, it was about 2000, going into 2001. I had just given birth to my daughter at the time, and I was in a 12-year relationship that was really going nowhere. And I was feeling unsatisfied, unhappy. I just felt like I was just going through the motions in this relationship just because I had two kids at the time. And, we talked about it, like where our relationship was going, and he was fine with how things were, and I wasn't because I didn't want to just keep having babies and, the relationship is going nowhere. So about 2001, I decided that, I need to do what's best for me because there's no sense for me to, be depressed in a relationship. I have, two children, two small children at the time, and, I'm feeling unfulfilled. So I decided to end the relationship. We decided we'll be cordial. Um, I'm lying. It was not it was not cordial. I wanted to be cordial, but he was like, you making a big mistake. You're not gonna find nobody else with two kids. Who gonna want you with two kids? Just kind of really messing with my mental, um, my psyche, like my self-esteem. Like he had me feeling like I was nothing and, nothing I did was good enough. So I was like, you know what, this is further confirmation that I need to leave. So I wanted it to be cordial. I was hoping he would understand, but he really didn't. But I was like, I don't care at this point because I have to do what's best for me. I did it your way. Now I have to do it for mine. So yeah, it was not cordial. I wanted it to be, but it wasn't. But nevertheless, I moved on. I was in a new decade in my life. I was in my 30s now, just turned 30. And I was like, I have to make a change for myself. Nobody understood that I would rather be single and happy than to be miserable just to say I have someone. So, with that being said, I just went ahead and did what I had to do. I had my job. I was working at night from 5 to midnight, and I had become friends with one of my coworkers. We were having fun. We would travel together. We would take the kids places and everything like that. So we formed a really lasting friendship. Well, during the course of our friendship, she got engaged, and she told me about this man that she met and that, they had been dating, and, they decided to get married. So now they're engaged. And I was like, oh, that's great. And she's like, you're going to be in the wedding. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. So they were having an engagement party. And so she was like, I want you to come to the house. My fiance has a friend that he wants you to meet. They thought that he would be really good for me to meet since, everything I had been through. And so I was like, sure, I'll come. I didn't really know anybody, but I just knew her and her fiance. But I was like, oh, sure, I'll come through. So I came through. It was really nice. Everybody was having a good time. And so they introduced me to this guy. And at first glance, I was like, oh, he's nice looking, nice and everything. And we started talking at the party, and, we kind of hit it off. We both enjoyed music, of all kinds. We both loved to travel. We named our favorite artists. And of course, my favorite artist of all time is those two, Prince and Michael Jackson. And his two, we named songs that we like. We're going down the list, like, what's your favorite song? And mine was Adore by Prince. And he's like, oh, yeah, I love that too. And then, we started talking about, other things we like to do. I said, I like to sing karaoke. He was like, I can sing too. So I was like, let me hear you sing. So he was singing, I can't remember the song, but it was some song. And I was like, oh, you have a voice. And I was like, okay. So we just kind of hit it off. We were laughing and talking and everything. And party was over. He's like, well, I want to continue to talk to you. And I was like, sure. So we exchanged numbers, and my oh, okay. So my girlfriend, she's like, so what do you think? She's like, what do you think about Bob? We're gonna say his name is Bob for the story. And I was like, I think he's really nice. I said, he's a breath of fresh air compared to my last relationship. Okay, so my girlfriend was like, "What do you think about Bob?" And I was like, "Bob, he's really nice. He's funny. Those kind of things is what initially attracted me to him because he had a sense of humor. He could hold a conversation. He could talk about anything under the sun, and I really liked that because all I had a point of reference was my last relationship, and it was none of that. He didn't like to travel. He barely had 2 words to say, except "you gonna give me some," and that was, that was it. But with Bob, we talked about music. We talked about traveling, the places that we've been, the places we want to go. And, I told him one of my favorite places, even though I'm an adult, is Disney World. And he's like, "I love Disney World too." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, we could travel together." So we had made all these plans to just do things and everything. So I told her, I said, "I really think, I would like to continue talking to Bob." So she was like, "Okay, great." She's like, "Well, he's renting my room since I moved in with my fiance. I wanted to rent my house out, so my brother and him are renting a room together. So y'all could talk and meet up and everything there." So I was like, "Okay." So we started talking, and our first conversation, I'll never forget. We talked pretty much all night long. I felt like a little teenage girl just talking about everything, like just stuff, whatever was on our mind. He told me he's originally from Philly, and how it was kind of rough growing up, but he came out pretty much okay. He has an older brother. His mom's a single mom like myself, so I could relate and he could relate. So, he had me thinking that the way he treats his mom is the way he treats his women. And I was like, "Well, that's great because, I respect a man that treats his mom, really well." Because someone always said you can tell how a man will treat you based on how he treats his mom, whether that's true or not. But it's an inkling because I've noticed some correlation. But I was like, "Okay, great." So we're talking, and then as time goes on, we decided we wanted to pursue this further. So now we're in a relationship. And I was like, wow, I didn't realize that it could be so easy to talk to someone. Like, I shared with him my upbringing, and based on our talks, he came from a rough background. I came from a protected background, meaning, my mother, she sheltered me. I'll just be honest. I was very sheltered growing up. The only two places I could go was school and church. So I was raised in the church, and I couldn't really do too much. So when I had a boyfriend in high school, it wasn't like your typical boyfriend where you go out, go to the movies, things like that. I had a phone boyfriend. That's all I was allowed to have. So so going from that to actually talking to someone and going out and dating and things like that, this was kind of new to me. So he's like, "I want you to meet my mom because, I think that we're getting serious and I want her to meet you." And I was like, "Sure, I have no problem with that." So we go to Philly, we meet his mom and his older brother, and they liked me from the beginning. They said things in hindsight now. I'm like, I should have read more into it, but they made a comment like, "Oh, you are so good for Bob." And I'm like, "Thanks." At the time I was just eating up the compliments because I'm like, "Wow, I'm a good influence on someone." Woo. But I didn't think anything of it. I was like, "Oh, thank you." They're like, "Oh, you're a good girl. I can tell you're a good girl." And I'm like, "Yeah." Saying to myself, I've been told that all my life because that's how my mother raised me, to be a good girl. But I didn't really understand what they meant. I do now, but they were like, "Oh wow." She's like, I'm gonna love you like my own daughter if I had one." And so I was just eating it up. I was like, "Oh, she's welcoming me into her family already. That's so great." And so the trip, we go back home, and I was like, "Okay, well, I guess you have to meet my mom now." So I was like, naturally, it's time for you to meet my mom. So I had an event at my house. I think it was like Thanksgiving or something. So he was there, my mom was there, my aunts and uncle, and some cousins. To know my mom is to love her because she has a look on her face that says it all. So when she first met him, I introduced her to him, and I was like, "Mom, I want you to meet Bob." And she just looked like, "Okay, hi." She didn't extend a hand. Usually when you greet someone, you extend a handshake or a hug or whatever. She was just like, "Hi, nice to meet you. I'm her mom." It was the complete opposite experience that I received when I met his mom. So to go from this warm embrace to meeting his mom to this icebox meeting my mom, it was so awkward. And I was just trying to, like, diffuse the situation so it wouldn't be so awkward. But my mother has no cut cards. She will tell it like it is. Her face will show it like it is. You could tell she was not having it. And at first, I was kind of upset with her because I was like, Mommy, I finally moved on, and this is how you're gonna, treat, because at first I was like, my mom's old fashioned, so she feels like if two people have children together, they're supposed to work it out no matter what because it's about the kids, it's not about you. And I'm like, I'm sorry, Mommy, but this is a new generation. I cannot go through misery and depression just to say that I'm with the kid's father and I'm dying inside, so that's where we bumped heads. So, I tried to play it off because luckily my aunt was there to diffuse the situation, and she was welcoming him. It's like, "Oh, it's so nice to meet you." And, they were interviewing him. They were like, "So what do you do?" All of that. And he told him, he's like, "I'm an HVAC tech." And so my aunt was like, "Oh, really? Well, I need some work for you to do. I have some work that I need you to do. I'm going to give you my number and I'll, call you so that you can come over and fix it. I think there's something wrong with their heater or something." So, I was like, "Whew, well, if Mommy doesn't like him, at least Auntie likes him."